listening to the Elemental Podcast.
Shut up!
My name is Al Nichols, and you're listening to the Elemental Podcast. This is entry number 126. What a weekend. I had something happen that was unfortunate. It caused anxiety. It's nothing I did. It was just something that I had the pleasure of being a part of, and that is having someone in your family just go missing. It ended up being nothing, thankfully, but we didn't know that at the time. And when someone kind of acts out of character, when it's not their typical nature to not be in contact with other people or to respond back, well, that's concerning, especially when they're in a relationship with someone and this relationship is not necessarily, it's not like brand new, but it's not like that old either, maybe a few months. And you don't really know them. You know a few things, but nothing that would make you ultimately too concerned. But like I said, when someone goes missing, you just don't know. So it could be something, maybe they went missing because they lost their phone, or, maybe they're in trouble. You don't know. And it's actually really, really easy to catastrophize, especially if you're dealing with mental illness, because you start thinking about the worst case scenarios, thinking about what it could be. Ultimately, it was very simple. This member of my family just left for the weekend, didn't really update anybody about what was going on, and just didn't really keep in contact. A little irresponsible, obviously. You could say a lot irresponsible, but here we are. And it's not that people necessarily owe you, kind of an explanation or answers. But, when you're living with other people and you act outside of your normal, well, people act that way because they're concerned, because they worry, right? And to put a person into a place where they're worrying and, you're kind of affecting their state of being just because you won't update them. Well, it's something that a child would honestly do. It's something that, children do often when they want to be rebellious. Like, I don't know you anything, I'm an adult now. I can do whatever I want. Even though children wouldn't necessarily say that, but we've heard that. We've heard that kind of reasoning before. That's not unexpected. But it can definitely make a huge impact on the lives of the people around you, whether you want to acknowledge that or not. That very much can be the case. And so is the case of this weekend. It made things inconvenient. And it only makes it worse when that person won't really acknowledge that they've done something wrong, that they caused an incident where there didn't need to be an incident. And I get it. You do want to feel like you have independence. You can go do whatever you want. But sometimes you do just have to check in, even if it's to say, I'm fine and I'll see you later. So definitely affected my plans. I had an appointment, a lunch date of sorts, planned with a friend that I haven't seen in quite some time. And, the pandemic happening and everything like that, I haven't really, been able to go out and do much with many people. Some people have moved away. Some relationships were strained and ended. And then, some people are just not available. That's very common. Plus, with all those factors already in play, I also have the factor that I don't always have reliable transportation. I don't have a car at the moment, and it's very inconvenient. It's not a permanent state of being, but while it is the case, I have to kind of work around that. And so with this particular family member, I have done a lot in recent history in covering registration costs and dealing with other issues on the vehicle and everything like that to make sure that it's up to date. Just so that I, not to say that I have access to it all the time, right? Like it's nothing like that. I'm often pretty good, when they leave and they spend time away. But there's just a few days in the week where I really, really, really need access to a vehicle, especially if I have a doctor's appointment like I did on Monday that I missed, and especially when I'm meeting up with a friend who really don't want them to think that I'm dropping the ball and I'm letting them down. But I end up being put in a place where I have to reach out and I have to do the responsible thing and let them know, hey, just to let you know, I've not heard from this person. I don't know what's going on. And so a lot of drama came from something that ultimately was nothing. It was just someone not communicating. And my point is not to shame my family member or anything like that. This kind of stuff happens, not all the time to us. I don't mean like that, but it just happens in life where people fail to communicate. And I think about how many times in my life I failed to communicate and I failed to see my own failings and my own flaws. Actually, when I think about this lunch appointment, this date that I had, right? I don't know what to call it. Like calling it a date sounds like a romantic thing. It's not that, but it is me like hooking up, hanging out with a friend that I haven't talked to in a really long time that I'm really excited to see. And there's a disappointment with that because I really wanted to go do that. And when the time comes and then I can't do it because of totally unforeseen circumstances, that sucks. But unfortunately for me, I also have a history of doing this as well. Not letting a person know, but kind of bailing out and flaking. It's not always been the case, but in the last few years, I became that person. I became the person that I was constantly frustrated with, and I really, really didn't like to hang out with in LA. And it's so common. You make an appointment and you go and you wait for someone and then they don't show up and they don't even bother to let you know. I mean, I had a friend who I really loved, but they did this a lot too. They would set a date with me and I would be excited and I would get ready and I would do all of this stuff in preparation to go spend time with them. And then they wouldn't even bother to let me know that they couldn't do it, or they'd get back to me real late in the day when it was too late and just let me know like, oh, I'm so sorry, whatever, or not even really apologize. That was kind of the other factor too. And they had plenty of reasons, just like I had plenty of reasons, right? Like, well, I've got these responsibilities and I've got to sometimes do this. And I don't always, there's a lot of excuses that come into the picture, and not often are they all bad. But, it still takes something away from that person, right? It still leaves a person feeling abandoned. And you can't really ignore those feelings. And if you treat them like, well, I'm sorry you feel that way, but it was out of my control and you don't want to take any responsibility for that, then kind of makes you an asshole. I mean, yes, things like this happen. This is unfortunate that this happened, but as much as, I watched this family member not really understand the responsibility that they needed to take for their actions, it actually only made me understand the responsibilities I had to take for these. I reached out and I communicated that, that not always trying to just put this on someone else either, but like owning up to the fact that I understand that I've done this before and I'm really sorry that this is happening now. And I understand if this does make you upset. And it's okay if you are angry. I hope you're not. I hope you can forgive this. But I understand. Because as much as, yes, a person can understand, there's still that feeling involved. And often we rationalize those things and we say, like, that doesn't really apply, right? Like, I can't control that. True, but you also do still have to take responsibility for the things that you can't control. There's always some sort of factor, right? Like, and it's not that you can necessarily change those things when they happen, but you do have to address them. When I look over my history, I realize that I haven't done that very much. I didn't address those things. I think about how many people that I ultimately canceled on. And I didn't ghost them, but I still canceled on them, and then I never rescheduled. I had really poor reasoning, though. Like, I had a bad excuse mentally. Not one that I gave to people, just one that I had accepted. A state of mind, a state of being, a state of friendship that ultimately I completely reject now. But I thought that this was actually a good thing. I thought it was like, a self-realization. But I used to look at these things and think, this is why I don't have many friendships. Not because I couldn't, but because I actually do want to spend time with people. But I understand that in spending time with a person requires an investment. And it does. When you are friends with people, there is an investment that is made. It is very important that when you spend time with that person, that you spend quality time with them, that you give them that time. That's what helps and nurtures a friendship and a relationship that's very healthy. And it is very healthy not to have too many relationships that you can't actually devote any time to. When I hear people have like all these various friendships, for me, that would seem very overwhelming. I don't have a good capacity to juggle too many things in my life like that. I often feel, or I often find myself in a lot of cases like, oh my God, I haven't reached out to this person in over a month or 2 months, like long periods of time. And I feel absolutely awful. And I should. I didn't reach out to them. I mean, how would I feel if I had a friend who wouldn't reach out to me? You do feel like, oh, well, maybe I'm not important. And I don't want anyone in my life to ever feel that they're not worth the time, that they're unimportant, that I don't care for them, because it couldn't be further from the truth. If you're a part of my life, that is something I genuinely feel. But feelings are not something that you can actually see unless you see the actions of those feelings. For instance, I can feel a certain way about a person. I can feel love towards someone, but that person will never understand or feel that love from me that I feel internally unless I express it. And that expression comes in the form sometimes of gifts, or it can come in just the time you spend with them, or communication, or being there for them when they need someone to be there for them. There's a show that comes into play, and it is equally as important as the feelings that you feel. And when you don't demonstrate those things, then you're left with someone talking something but not demonstrating. And often when someone doesn't demonstrate, you even have to question the validity and the actual point of fact. Do they actually feel this way? Because you can even personalize that and look at your own experience as well. I love my mother, and when her birthday comes up, I always call her and I always send a gift, and I try to keep in regular contact. You think about these relationships, these healthy relationships that are in your life. Hopefully you have them, but you apply that to others. And sometimes that's not necessarily fair because we all have our own love language, obviously, but you are looking for something tangible, something that you can hold in your hand. And even with my complaints in the past, with past friendships and everything that I have gone on about, there were other ways that people communicated their love to me. And unfortunately, sometimes I wanted to hold them to a standard that that was not what they did, And it's a little bit of a give and take. Sometimes you have to, if they only understand one thing, then you need to reach out on their terms and demonstrate that and show them. And then over time you can show them, but also this. And that way they begin to see that love. They see that connection. They see the genuineness of your feelings. Again, feelings are something you have to express through action. There's that line in Batman Begins. It's not who I am underneath, but what I do that defines me. Well, that goes toward relationships as well. It's not what you feel, it's what you do to demonstrate. It's actually a combination of the two. One should always accompany the other. So as I think about this pattern, this chain in my life, and I think about all these times where I have failed to demonstrate that to people that I love and then didn't understand, like, why didn't these people not reach back out to me? I think for me, I've had an interesting life and some really good people who've come into my life who have been far more patient with me than I originally understood. I've always thought of myself to be a really accepting and caring and loving person. Those things are true. However, when people are looking for certain demonstrations, I think that's where I come up short. I understand too that, especially when a person has various mental health conditions. So take someone who's maybe borderline. I talked about this last time. There may be certain things that they need out of the relationship that you're not giving them, or that they would need out of any relationship that is not typical of everyone, but it is absolutely something that they need. For example, in that you might need to confirm with them on a very frequent basis that you love them, that you accept them, that they're a benefit in your life. It may seem something like you have to really go out of your way to do, but yeah, you have to go out of your way to do it. You should want to support and uplift your friend. And if this is something that could really, really benefit them and help them, then why wouldn't you want to do it? It is something that I see now that I've been very good in, but by accident. I have been very good to friends with mental health. In fact, I think I've been better to friends with mental health conditions than people without them. Definitely a better friend to the neurodivergent. I don't know. I guess because I'm neurodivergent myself, and because there's not only a understanding between us, right? Us neurodivergent people, but we're a lot more forgiving. And we're a lot more accepting. And I guess we're also maybe a little bit more set up long-term for the things that we really need and desire just not to be fulfilled. And it's easier to find in ourselves because we end up doing those things naturally because we express the things that we often want. Or, not always, but I think more consistently. And so as I've started to realize this, it has become more and more important to make a determination. Make the determination to be a better friend and really show people in your life that love and that connection that you genuinely have for them. If you really, really want them to know you love them, show it. And show it in the way that they need it. Don't be withholding. Never, never, never go and treat a person like, well, this is abnormal, right? Most people don't like this or don't need this or don't want this. And it's weird. And sure, there are some exceptions, obviously. Someone wants you to do something that makes you truly uncomfortable for a variety of different reasons that maybe infringes on your boundary. Then maybe that's something that you wouldn't do, but we're talking about most of the time, like nothing that would really feel like a boundary crossing thing, but just something that you definitely would have to do that would be different than your normal relationships. For me, when someone makes physical contact, and I don't mean anyone, right? Like seriously, if I don't know you and you make physical contact with me, I can have a variety of different reactions. I'll get into that in a moment, just some of the physical interactions I've had. But look, for people who are close with me, when they touch me, they show affection. I don't know what this necessarily ties into, when it comes just to mental health, but I know what it comes to in my life, why I desire this. I wasn't raised in a touchy-feely household. I mean, I actually was a kid who was very physical and wanted to hug and be loved. And I enjoyed that, but I didn't get that a lot, especially with my mother. That wasn't her tendency. In fact, sometimes I felt like she was almost repelled right? Like, she wasn't the kind of parent where you could go sleep in their bed, when the things were scary, when you had a bad dream after an earthquake. That was something that she kind of treated as like, grow up. And that was not right on her part, but it was something that I experienced. And as I got older, I often dealt with this on a regular, continuous cycle until I kind of grew like this callous shell where I was afraid to ever express in any kind of way that I needed that. And so, like I was very standoffish and I didn't express a lot of things. And this is actually, I always just attributed, the fact that I was hiding my gender identity and what I was going through internally. Because I was hiding all of that, I didn't really have deep, meaningful connections and relationships. But it was more than that. I was so messed up by that experience when I was young that I actually thought that it was something that most people thought was disgusting or that they thought was like repulsive. My mom didn't find me repulsive for the record, and she had her own issues going on. And, and it wasn't that she didn't love me, but my mom has never been a person, maybe because of her own issues, right, that I wouldn't even want to try to dare to confirm or whatever. And the fact that she never sought treatment or even understood this. And again, unhealthy upbringing brings about more unhealthy upbringing. But this was something that she just didn't do, and it was something that was very lacking in my life. So a problem that I didn't understand until later, when people around me started to do this, hopefully it would have been people, in some cases it was people who didn't abuse that, but then there was other people who absolutely did. I understood that I was completely around that, like they had me around their finger. And I didn't really know. I thought that was love and affection, not understanding that was manipulation. So it's important in your life that, one, it's not a method of manipulation. Don't do that. Really don't do that. But also, it's just really important that, like, when people are around me who are really close with me and they feel like, taking me by the hand. And there are a number of occasions where I'm absolutely comfortable and okay with that. Not everyone, mind you. And that's not something I would ever demand all my friends to do. Like all my women friends or non-binary friends, like that may be something like that's okay. I understand when guys don't do that, right? And again, but it is something like, I also really appreciate when someone will be open to tell me that they love me. That is something I try to tell the people in my life. It feels weird sometimes, like, oh, do I express this because this is something else that it was really hard to express growing up. Like, of course you love your family. And it wasn't like I lived in a household that didn't express that they loved each other, but it was also strange. Sometimes people wouldn't say it because they were angry or we just felt very awkward saying it, especially when it wasn't reciprocated. At least, maybe again in the actual feelings, but not in the actions of saying that back. And it's something that I really try hard never to withhold from anyone in my life, regardless of the turmoil, the fight we are currently going through. With family, I will still communicate with them that I love them, even though maybe in that moment I'm not necessarily feeling that. But I also know this is probably a feeling in the moment because I'm angry, and that anger is the only thing I can feel at the moment. Doesn't mean the love isn't there. It just means that I'm not as in touch with it in that moment. And sometimes it's just good to let people know, yes, I still love you. Going back to people in my life who've had various mental illnesses, we've been in fights. That happens, right? But, typically, in a neurotypical person, there's an experience that you can have with someone when you're fighting with them. And, there's just normal behaviors that we grow to accept. People scream and then they hang up the phone, they march off, and that's fine. But with some of us, when you do that, it doesn't just mean that let's cool down for a little while and come back to it later. And that's something I think I actually tried to employ. Get really upset and have a fight. and I'd want to cool off. And I would think like, okay, that's fine. We'll just cool off for a moment. We'll come back to it later. You kind of have to think like pet mentality, right? Like if a pet, if your dog or your cat, like if you leave for a little while, they freak out. They do. They're wondering, where the hell did they go? Why have they been gone for so long? No matter how long it is. Like they don't understand why you're not there. And so that's why a lot of pets and stuff like that get really angry with their owners or with their family, with, these people, because they're upset. They don't understand, right? They don't have the capacity to understand. They just know what they felt. And I understood very quickly that while I may have had this perspective of it's good just to go back to neutral corners for a little while, even though that's my approach to it. Maybe that's not necessarily the way that I felt in the middle of a fight. Like, I don't want to just leave something lingering for a little while, because that's traumatic in itself as well. Like I want resolution. In fact, when I look back over the last year, that was one of the things that I wanted most, was resolution, and had to come to a point of understanding like that's probably not something I'll ever get in some cases. But when you can offer that thing that a person needs just to feel a little bit more secure, that everything is going to be okay, right? Because as I mentioned earlier, like catastrophizing, it's very easy to do. I would find in some of these friendships that I had with neurodivergent people that they felt like after the fight that was the last time we were ever going to speak. And I felt devastated by that. I'm like, oh my God, I'm so sorry that I led you to feel that way. And I could have stayed in a place of, why would you think that, right? Like, we just had a fight. We're going to be fine, like we just needed to go to... I could have acted that way, and I could have been a total asshole to them. Like, why would you think that? That's so abnormal. Sure, it's not what a lot of people would think. It doesn't mean what they thought was wrong, or that they're even in control of that. And often, like, one of the reasons that a lot of people in your life, you would encourage them, especially when they're neurodivergent, to seek counseling and therapy and see a psychiatrist and get treatment and everything, is because it gives us better tools in how to manage these emotions, or, better tools about how we can, like manage them or control them or do whatever we need to do. Like cognitive behavioral therapy, or DBT, I think is the other one, but I don't know what that stands for. But I know if you're borderline, that is one of the things that you would do, because the CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, wouldn't be an appropriate therapy, because that's about that's using something that a person typically with borderline, other, scenarios. Anyway, over explaining. But so this is something that I find in my life that I constantly, I would make the mistake in the past, but now as I move forward, and I've had a couple of encounters, not many, like I'm not having tons of fights. I'm rebuilding right now, right? Things are in a good place, but ultimately fights will come, disagreements will come. How do you respond to them? Instead of treating it like a thing that, like, this is a blanket thing, and this is the way that I react, and this is what we do with everyone. This is the normal, and you got to get with the system, you got to get with the program. This is the normal. No, instead, I tried to think about, like, how do I fine tune these relationships? So I think this is actually where it can become very helpful not to have too many relationships in your life. I think there is something deeply unhealthy about that. I just do. When you have too many people that you have to, and if you have the capacity to do it, then good on you. And if you benefit from it and it's actually a healthy thing in your life, then I don't want to take anything away from you. I don't want anyone to feel shame because you have a lot of friends. Well, good for you. Seriously, you might have the absolute capacity to do that. I think, though, a lot of people don't. And I think a lot of people don't really understand the commitment you are getting involved in when you call someone a friend, when you call someone your partner or your lover, or whatever capacity that person plays in your life. It's a role that you should take more seriously. Instead of just generalizing it and thinking that everything you've experienced with others also applied to the same relationship, that may be the place where you start, like a basic understanding. But the reason that you spend time with these individuals is you can actually learn more about them. And that, yes, in that time you will learn what triggers them. I had a friend where I would sometimes say things, right, and they were a joke to me. And it wasn't like a criticism or anything like that, but it was a joke, and I didn't understand what I did was make them go into a mindset of catastrophizing something, like actually jumping to the worst case scenario. So like the example would be like, oh, it would be real, could you imagine if they were actually out like, blowing all their money and doing whatever, about someone else in their life? And just as a joke, right? Like, nothing serious. But what I don't realize in that moment is, or I didn't realize in those moments, right, when I did something similar, was now I've caused them to spiral. Whoops, I didn't mean to do that. I didn't mean to send you over the edge. I was doing it because I thought I was easing tension, helping relieve that. Instead, I did the reverse. I actually made it worse. But I was very good about this. Immediately, I pause, I recognize what I did, and I'm like, I am so sorry. It was not my goal to, and it does take a humility and a little bit of humbleness that a lot of people have a hard time expressing. People have a resistance, especially now, more so than ever, admitting when they were wrong. I think when you enter into a friendship with a person, that is one thing you have to go in with open eyes, is that you are going to be wrong. You're going to be wrong a lot. You are going to accidentally hurt this person even when you don't mean to. You're going to hurt this person even, well, when you want to as well. That's just something that's going to happen. I would love to think of myself as a person who would never, ever want to hurt someone. And I think for a big majority, that's true. But when I'm hurt, what is the likelihood when I'm really, really hurt that I'm going to go back out and I'm going to hurt someone else? I'm going to hurt that same person. I'm going to hurt them in an equal or worse way. I've done it. I'm ashamed of it. I don't like that I ever did it. I don't like that that was ever a thought that came across my head, but I also know it's something that I have resisted. But inevitably, it is something that even though I would like to think it will never happen again, it probably will at some point. I don't want to put it off the table either, because I want to acknowledge it as an issue, as something that I have to be careful of, not just something, because when you don't want to consider things like, no, I'd never do that, well, then you're kind of opening yourself up. Just like a person was like, I would never get involved in a cult. And all of a sudden you find yourself in maybe some form of cult that you failed to understand and see. Maybe you had a judgment against people, thinking like people in cults or people in those situations are stupid. They're manipulated. They're idiots. And often that is not the case at all. A lot of times they're very, very smart people with great intelligence, great empathy, who are really trying to do the right thing and, be a part of people's lives and, want to do good things in the world. But it happens. You can get fooled into these things. And I think the thing that people get tricked by all the time is thinking it can't be me. But when you're open to think, well, it actually very well could, you have a better resistance. You're not going to stumble into that trap like many would. Not to say you couldn't, but you're better prepared not to. Being prepared means that you open yourself up for an eventuality or even a remote possibility. Because the truth is, it could happen. You don't want it to happen, right? But you prepare so that it doesn't. So, as I move through my life, one of the things that I am constantly now working on in every relationship that I am a part of, I want to be there for them specifically. I want them to know that the way I treat them is not the way that I treat everyone else. I don't mean in quality of like good or bad. I just mean that I don't consider them just to be everyone else. I'm there for them. I'm there with an understanding of what their triggers are, that I don't want to trigger them. And if I do trigger them, that I want to quickly understand what I did and change that behavior so I never do it again. A relationship is about trust and about making the other person feel safe. And when those are missing in a lot of relationships, I think those actually, unfortunately, are very common in a lot of relationships. People lack basic trust. I think when people make jokes and criticisms and make you the butt of a joke, something else I've talked about recently, that can do that. It can make you lose trust with that person, so you're not as willing to open up to them. And sure, you'll probably continue to spend time with that person like many do. You'll continue to consider those things relationships and friendships. But maybe the problem is that you've never really thought of that, as, like, well, this is just common. And that's sad. It's sad that we accept something like that as common. It shouldn't be. That shouldn't be a common thing. Being degraded, being belittled, being made fun of, being someone's punchline, just so that we can have another human presence in our life and not be alone. Loneliness is worse when you're with others than it is when you're by yourself. It is a message, something that I preach very often. And as I've looked back, it's something that I found myself in many relationships experiencing that same thing, going through the struggles and the trials for very, very little benefit. For a time, you can definitely tolerate what someone may be doing. I mean, tolerate it in a way because, there are other benefits and everything like that, so you put up with it. But it's not normal. And it is something I think over time is the killer of most friendships and relationships. It's just very, very healthy to be mindful of the things that we do, our interactions, and never just say that, well, this is normal and this is the way you should be. No, accepting the person for the way that they are. It's, this is, again, another balancing act. Person should always be responsible for their own mental health, for their own progress, for their own treatment. Person should be on that path of growth. No one should be forcing them to do it, but they should be doing that. That should be independent of your relationship. It's very, very important. Doesn't mean you can't have bad days. Doesn't mean that you can't rely on your friends for emotional and help and support in that way. Of course you can, but they can't be the sole form of that, and you have to do work. If you're doing work, and you're a part of a relationship, then the other part is the other interested party that loves you, that wants to be with you. They've got to be there for you too, and they've got to do their homework as well. So when they talk to you and they find out about your interest, that's why when a birthday comes up, this is something that I started to understand about like holidays. Holidays are very important indicators of where your relationships are at. They just are. If you never hear from that person during a holiday, on your birthday or any other day, and maybe because they don't want to get you a gift or whatever it may be, because it's not always that. Sometimes it's like, I don't have the ability to, but there are other things that we can give. There are other things that we can do. Relationships do cost us something. Money, time, patience, but they cost us something. And like anything that costs something, there's supposed to be a benefit. And it's healthy to expect a benefit. It's healthy to look for that benefit. In fact, I encourage everyone to look at your relationships in your life and look at the benefit, not the direct benefits, right? Like, look, I've been with friends who've not had very much money, so I ended up covering a lot of costs, but I never felt like I was being put out because I understood that was just something that they didn't have the capacity to do. But I understood that they also appreciated it, that they wanted to be there, that they were present, that when they spent time with me, that was never a factor. I never really, really cared about that. I actually cared more when they would use that as the excuse of why they couldn't be with me, why they couldn't go do something with me. Well, I'm broke and I'm really sorry. And, just I have to wait this out or whatever. And then they keep pushing it back over and over again because they don't have, but they don't understand, like, I'm not upset about the cost of doing it. I'm upset about the fact that you won't just spend time with me or do anything with me. And also too, like, you don't understand the contributions that you make in your life, why I'd be willing to spend money in exchange for your time, because the time that I get from you is a benefit. It is a gift, and it's not like I'm paying them off necessarily, but it is something that is totally okay. And I think with money, things get tricky. I mean, it's something that I keep finding over and over again. Things just get tricky, right? Because we do live in a world where money is important, and it is okay every once in a while. There's just some things where you don't feel comfortable doing but it doesn't mean you can't do something. So there should be reasonable expectations and a good overlook of everything from both sides. It's just a fundamental thing. So as I go through my relationships now, I'm mindful of that. I look at these different factors. I spend time before I'm going to spend actual time with them. Kind of getting into the mindset of, okay, let's take a moment and not change, right? I'm not changing my personality. In fact, I found that I did this a lot with various groups of people, especially you got to think about this in the way that you would go to work and then the way you would go to spend time with friends. It can be you. Both of them can be genuinely you, but your presentation can change. And then there are some times that people literally just change everything about them when they're around other people, and that's disappointing. And that can be for a variety of different reasons. But I think there's actually healthy ways too where you can help promote them to really be themselves. You find something that maybe they're a little bit more guarded on, and you encourage that. So that, for example, right, I can be around friends and stuff like that who, well, I'm a person who's very open with my interests and the things that I love, but I've noticed that there are other people who feel like, oh, I'm geeking out, I'm getting a little too nerdy. I like to encourage that. I want them to open up more. I want them to feel like, come on, get nerdy with me. Whatever it is, it doesn't mean it's comic books. I mean nerdy about fashion or makeup. Like, get nerdy with me, like really open up, unleash. I'm safe to do that. And to whatever degree you want to. Won't mock you, and you give them a little bit, and over time they learn to trust you, and they learn to open up a little bit more. It's healthy things like that you can really help your friends in your life, and in doing so, really helps you too, because as they open up, you get to be more open as well. It's a win-win. It's a win-win-win. But I like to think of that time right before I'm meeting up with them as the prep time. I'm going into this, and I'm sort of like, if you knew that someone, for example, liked, I used to have a car that had dual climate control. It just means that on the driver's side, you could set the temperature to one thing. Passenger side, you could change it to something else. That was very nice, being able to, have dual climate. So I'm air conditioned to the, temperature that I need, and they're, feeling comfortable at the temperature that they need. Very helpful. Well, it's kind of like that. I'm setting the thermostat. I'm making things more, comfortable for them. Not changing me, but I'm making it better for them. Until I get in that place. I had a friend who, I think when I look back on this, I have such an interesting perspective on this now. But one of my friends used to say when I picked them up for like 15 minutes, I wouldn't be totally comfortable. I wouldn't be totally there. But as we traveled on a little bit, then I would kind of ease into it, and things would, kind of level out. Well, then eventually they just noticed that I didn't do that anymore, and I was comfortable with them instantly. But early on, yeah, it took a moment because I'm still kind of learning and adapting. Only thing that really changed right before I met them, or right before I met up with them, I got better at making sure that all those presets, all the things that made them happy, right? Our interaction, everything like that was just kind of tuned in before I got there. So that way there wasn't any kind of tension or any kind of lingering, anything in the air, right? It was just, I'm there for you. I'm ready. I know you. I know that this is what's going to make you happy. Little things like that are the way you demonstrate love, are the way that you make people in your life better. You create circumstances and you just make things easier for people. And often if you do this, they're going to pick it up and they're going to do this for you too. It is reciprocated. And if it's not, then you can always tell that person hey, when you say this, or when you do this, it makes me a little uncomfortable, or encourage them. I really, really like it when you do that. I had a friend, she liked to, well, I don't know if she did this with everyone, but for me, I think we were really comfortable. And like I said, I really like physical contact. And they would scratch right below my neck, right? Love that. Saw someone talking about that in dating advice, and they were talking about with men in particular, if you scratch them on the back of their head, they love that, right? Yeah, and it's true. I love that, and that was something that they did, and then they stopped doing it for a really long period of time, and then one day they did it, and I was just like, oh my God, I love it when you do that. And they made it a point to do that more. I didn't have to go out of my way. I didn't have to insist. I didn't have to demand. And they actually got to a place too, because they really liked it, especially arm scratches and stuff like that. They really liked that kind of thing too. And when you're at a comfortable place with someone, yeah, you can ask for things like that when they're good with it. Then you can ask for things like that. You can ask for personal, and I don't even mean this in a romantic way, even though it can apply that way too, kind of an intimacy, a safety. I mean, when you're dating someone and you won't go out of your way to show little gestures like that, little gestures go so long. I mean, got to think that a person, wants to be there with you, and there's just things that they really desire and maybe are a little too timid to ask for. And you can assume well, I think they're okay. Well, maybe just consider, maybe they're okay. Maybe your relationship is even going great. But maybe you could do a few little bit more things here and there. Just kind of find out. And as that happens, I think we just get closer with one another. I think we get closer to those people in our life. Seriously, when you fine tune things for people's experience, right? When you fine tune your relationship, it's just a healthy way of being. Recently I was talking to my friend, and he's one of the people that I realized not long ago. I'm like, oh my God, I haven't talked to him in about a month. Just time slipped away. I got really busy into work and everything like that. And I reached out. I'm like, oh my God, I am so sorry. I just realized we haven't talked in over a month. And I don't know how the hell that happened. And on their side, they realized oh my God, yeah, I was just thinking the same thing too. How did I let that happen? But we both recognize that. And now we actually put even more effort in making sure that we don't do that. It's not a chore either. We really genuinely love talking to each other. And I really love him. He's been a great friend. He's super just understanding and has been reliable when I haven't. And now, as I'm getting back into this place in my life where I want healthy relationships, I also started having an understanding, I don't just want one, I want multiple, right? Because, well, maybe not, it was funny because I used to say this even on the podcast, I'm cool with just having one really close friendship. All right, I've learned a few lessons. Maybe that's not the best approach in life. Because, I think actually the other relationships you were part of too, you learn something and you bring it back to other relationships that you have. Plus, there is such a thing as healthy time away from someone. There is where you can get kind of bored and predictable, and being a part of other friendships and relationships can actually help broaden your horizons, right? And break you out of the typical. It is very important. There's so many good reasons for it, and I'll talk about that another time. But yeah, and not having too many, but not only having just one if you can help it. It is healthy. It is normal. It is good to have multiple relationships in your life. It can actually if one relationship is struggling, you may not notice that if you don't really have any others and you're putting all your eggs in that one basket too. I mean, I know it sounds like kind of like a financial investment or something at that point, like not an emotional thing, but no, you do have to kind of look out for yourself as well. And by doing so, you're looking out for your relationships. This very much is a factor of put the mask over your own face first before helping anyone around or children, right? Because you're useless to others if you're incapacitated. And then that means someone has to help you. And that doesn't mean that people don't want to help you. But obviously, if we can help it and people don't have to help us, especially constantly, that's definitely a better way of being. So, going back to everything that I started all this with, yes, very frustrating. It's very frustrating when you don't feel that your needs are met, when you don't feel that people are listening to you, and that can happen in your family relationships or any other kind of relationships. Ultimately, what I experienced this past weekend is brief. Fortunately, nothing really happened. Hopefully, with some love and patience, things get worked out, right? Things are communicated. I'm really doing my best in this particular moment not to get just angry. Because I was genuinely angry. I was very angry that I missed out on things that I don't get to be a part of very much. Like, I don't have a lot of demands in my life. These are the very, very simple, basic things that I need occasionally. But ultimately, everything will be okay. Right? At least on my end. And, if I don't see, any kind of change or any potential remorse or regret or anything like that, or even if I just don't see change, like the behavior modified in the future, then I'll do whatever I need to do for myself at that point to put myself in a position where I don't have to experience that again. I don't think that's where we are here, but it is something to keep in mind. So, wanted to share this. I think this is something that as we get back, with people, something I think we're all kind of struggling to do, something that we've done so long that we had a momentum doing it, but now as the world's reopening, it's something like, oh my God, I forgot how to do this. How did I do this before? You just kind of take it for granted. Maybe it was never something you even logically understood you were doing, but now as you're older and you've spent all this time in isolation and you're just kind of starting to think, this seems a lot harder than I remember. Was this as hard before? And maybe it was. Maybe you just became very natural at it. Maybe it was muscle memory. Who the hell knows? But being mindful of that now and taking these steps, it'll build. I guess we'll be doing the Biden thing, the Build Back Better. The really kind of chunky, wordy slogan from his 2020 campaign. But yeah, build back better, right? Build back those relationships better in your life than they were before. And you can do so sometimes just as simply understanding what that person's needs are. And doing your best when you can, when it's reasonable, and really, really when you want to demonstrate how much you love them. It really will make their life so much better. It'll make your life so much better. So, I don't know, do it. Thank you for joining me here. I'm going to end it there. I appreciate you spending this time with me because you could spend this time elsewhere, but you don't. You listen here in this podcast every single week. I feel really good still on my medications that I'm taking, still on Adderall, still on whatever the thyroid medication I'm on, seeing great progress and results. Definitely be talking about that again in the future. But things have actually, other than a few frustrations here and there, things have actually been going really well on my part. And I thank everyone for being a part of that journey, my story. And I'm really glad that you let me be a part of yours. So anyway, I'm going to leave you like this. Build back better and escape the ordinary. Goodbye, everybody.
This concludes this entry of the Elemental Podcast. If you enjoyed today's show, head over to houseofl.com to gain access to our show notes, additional podcasts, the photo diary, and more. If you're feeling financially benevolent and would like to support this podcast, go to patreon.com/elemental, and for as little as $1 per entry, you'll get an ad-free version of this podcast, patron-only monthly live stream Q&As, and Elle's everlasting gratitude. Music was provided by Damn The With Siren, featuring the songs Big Mouth and Soft and Blue. All music was used with the artist's permission. If you want to hear more of their incredible music, go to damnthewitchsiren.com. For inquiries, questions, or last letters, email info@lnichols.com or visit the contact page at houseofl.com. The Elemental Podcast is a subsidiary of House of L. Copyright 2019, all rights reserved.